Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman rush towards Kansas. They weren't able to confirm it from a distance, but Superman, the first to arrive on scene, is able to affirm their fears are very real. A half-dozen heroes lie dead on this small rustic farmhouse. Among them are Arsenal, Wally West, and a being called Sanctuary. This place was supposed to be a safe house, a way for young heroes to learn and develop to one day join the Justice League. And now, they're all gone. Bruce sadly remarks that their dream of redemption has once again become a path towards vengeance. Booster Gold is confronted by Harley Quinn, and the two get in a vicious battle with one another. At a moment where the fight dies down, Booster says he's an idiot. He watched Harleen kill himself and all his friends. But Harley says she was there and she didn't save anyone, but that's just because she was running from him. He's the one that killed them all. Hello and welcome to Comic Island. My name is Arden, and this is my recap and review of Heroes in Crisis #1. So, I fully admit, I am reviewing this issue because I heard it was a lot like Identity Crisis. Yeah, it's been a good 2 years since DC has put anything out that I truly despise, and I was eager for the opportunity to see them create a train wreck. I mean, it was possible. I don't exactly unambiguously accept Tom King's writings anymore these days. I learned that lesson the hard way through the Batman series, which is, good, but still deeply flawed. And writers, even the very best of writers, do struggle with these big DC crossovers. So it's Tom King's turn to jump on this wagon and see where it takes us, and oh boy, this first issue is an interesting one. Let's start with its best foot forward, and that is most certainly the art. By gosh, the art of this comic is something else. Clayman is a great and competent artist whose work I've always admired. But to be honest, this comic was a bit of a surprise to me. I genuinely didn't know he was this good. I don't think I've ever seen him this good. I'm sure to a degree a lot of that is owed to Tomu More's coloring, but to be honest, a lot of it seems to be in the pencils and the inks. The facial expressions are on point and really deliver in a fun and interesting way. But what works for me is just how little things are conveyed so effectively. This first issue is very quiet and sets a lot of stuff up, but the build-up of it really is done well through Clayman's artwork. It's shown well in the battle between Booster Gold and Harley Quinn, but it's really little things that work well for the artwork of this comic. Look at this image of Harley Quinn eating a pie. Very simple, but brilliantly effective in how it's framed, the fine detail in the one panel where she's eating from the fork. It all just really implies a lot about Harley's body language and her current mindset about this. The artwork deserves a solid 10 out of 10 from me, which is a pretty good thing because we never actually give out ratings for these things. So that doesn't really mean anything, but it's just stellar, near perfect artwork as far as I'm concerned. And I gotta tell you guys, I'm really getting sick of phenomenal artists having to deal with lousy scripts for these big events. Now, to be fair, it's not that bad. This isn't the worst comic or the worst start to a big crossover event from the big two that I've ever seen. It's not even really close. I also don't really see or understand the comparisons to Identity Crisis, besides the fact that the title of the two stories share a word in common. Identity Crisis felt a lot more grounded down into politics and wanting to be mature and tough. This comic is bright and colorful, has a lot of action, and focuses on some pretty fun characters without going overboard. Yeah, a bunch of people are killed, but who cares? And I think that's the real problem with this thing, is it wants to be like, oh, look at all these deaths, but the second they showed Arsenal and Wally West's corpse, I knew it was all meaningless. Literally the least meaningful thing in the world, because neither of these characters are permanently dead, and come on guys, like that's a joke now, right? We all know that's not how this is gonna go down. So whatever happens, well, Booster Gold's in this story, and it's already clear time travel is involved. So, nope, these deaths don't matter. Will this event matter? Best of luck with that. I doubt it. Especially given the topsy-turvy nature of the overall DC Rebirth timeline. We kind of know how things have to go from here because of Doomsday Clock still theoretically taking place ahead of time with this. What is going on with Doomsday Clock? Has anyone read those comics in recent memory? Who cares? So, if I'm coming across as cynical about all this, it's because this issue has nothing to offer. I don't know what I expected out of this, but I definitely didn't expect this big old nothing burger. There's some build-up, and I guess there's some interesting things going on, but personally, I couldn't care less about any of this. The comic book deaths are meaningless because, well, that's a definition of their meaning at this point. The overall story just seems like this weird time-travel-y thing. No, you killed all the people! No, you killed all the people! No, Harley's dead! No, I'm dead! No, we shouldn't have done this thing! Oh, we should have done this thing, but everyone's dead. I don't know. There's nothing to this comic. How do I summarize this as briefly as possible? We get a very tired trope of a bunch of heroes doing some weird lineup thing where they're talking about themselves over a page. Boring. Then we get the Trinity fawning over some dead people, most of whom I never heard of before, besides the two that we've all heard of before. And then we have Booster Gold and Harley Quinn having a fight. And honestly, Tom King is a great writer in a lot of regards. I really love what he's done with Mr. Miracle and what he did with Vision. He is one of the worst Harley Quinn writers I've ever seen. It's cringy, it's stupid, it's so freaking unbearable. And I feel like I'm being super negative about this comic, which, to be fair, is not how I feel about the overall production. It's competent. I don't particularly care for the script. I care a great deal about the artwork and am kind of disappointed all the more in the writing because of it. But, you know, we're only the first issue in, and there is a lot of build-up, which is carefully paced out. The issue starts out nice and quiet, so there's room for something cool and exciting to happen here. I'm just not at all sold on the entire thing. If you'd like a book of pretty pictures, then I recommend you go to your nearest bookstore and buy an adult coloring book. If you like a half-baked event, I guess this is a comic for you, but otherwise I don't really recommend this to anyone. Look, I understand I came into this thing not 100% on board, but I am perfectly willing to have given it a chance if it won me over. I like Tom King, he's a nice guy, and I love when his writing's good, because it can really dig deep into characters in some interesting ways. But Harley is not the kind of character for that sort of writing, and as such, Tom King doesn't really resort to his usual tactics for deconstructing a character. Instead, he just makes her completely unbearable. Booster Gold, meanwhile, is just kind of barely saying anything and clearly has some big burden hanging over him, which is obviously a function of this story, but is also completely against the character of Booster Gold. Completely against the character that Tom King had written with Booster Gold in an earlier Batman story. Now obviously a lot of this is intentional, but I gotta tell you, I'm looking at this thing and I don't care about any of this. I don't really like the way these characters are presented, and I'm not at all convinced that anything about this story truly matters. And that's not a good sign. That's a terrible sign. And in that regard, this may very well become another identity crisis, in that it's going to be a big DC event that I may very well come to hate the very thing it stands for. It's not mature, it's not the heroes growing up and doing something new and interesting, it's treading old ground, ground that I've seen in a dozen other comics before, some ranging as far back as the 1980s. Are we sure Tom King wrote this? Honestly, it barely fits in with even the worst aspects of his Batman writing. I am having trouble parsing this out in my brain right now. Usually I try and give a bit of time between my initial reading and the recording of the review, but it really wasn't in the schedule this week, so I just sort of read it and went with it, which is why my thoughts are a little more rambly and all over the place, but You're just getting the raw, unfiltered reaction I'm having to this right now, guys, and I am baffled. The more I think about this comic, the more I'm looking over it. It's disappointing. A big major misstep in Rebirth, although one that I entirely expected to happen and almost kind of looked forward to, because, you know, sometimes a good disaster is worth watching and documenting and seeing what we can learn of it. I don't know what I do different in this story. I would never do a story like this. It's pastiche, boring, evocative of one of the worst things DC has done in the modern age. And I am starting to see the identity crisis comparisons, because it's taking this tone without the corresponding maturity that's required of it. You can deconstruct Batman all you want. You can probably even do the same to characters like Harley Quinn and the Joker, but that's not really what Wonder Woman and Superman are all about. This was the major failing of the DCEU, and something I don't think Warner Brothers or DC Comics truly gets. They, on some level, don't understand their more lofty or fun superheroes that aren't really about whatever this comic is supposed to be about. And you know, for all the flack I give Identity Crisis, it did deal with mature themes of rape and sexual assault. What's this comic all about? Murder's bad, time travel's weird, the Trinity sucks? Tom King, if you are for some reason listening to this, and God help you if you are, I would like to do an interview with this. I guess. I don't really want to confront the man on this thing. I don't really need an explanation. I'm just so curious about what the hell I'm reading and why. Why? This is the most unnecessary event or story I've read in some time. It just doesn't have that hook that any good comic book crossover event should have. Even the more lackluster Marvel and DC crossovers in recent years had easy hooks. Trinity War, 3 iterations of the Justice League team are fighting over a box. Got it. Monsters Unleashed, a bunch of monsters are rampaging around the Earth. Got it. Original Sin, Uatu was murdered and somebody did it. We don't know who, it's a mystery. Easy peasy. All of these comics are super easy to digest and understand what they're about, and while it's not necessary for an event, Final Crisis, for example, isn't as easily defined but is super awesome once you get into it. This comic is no Final Crisis. Tom King, and I think we can start to safely say this at this point, is no Grant Morrison. Please, if you disagree, share feedback, and I'm not being cynical here. I'm not demanding that you guys explain to me why you like the comic. I would like to know what other people who liked this thing see in it. Please, like I don't get it. I read this thing and I was like, that's it? This is the start to the big event? This is the start to Tom King's first crossover event thingy? It sucks. Please, tell me why it doesn't suck. What do you like about this besides the artwork, which I obviously quite enjoyed myself? I'm baffled. And I haven't been this flabbergasted in some time. It's happened before. I honestly can't think of issues where I've done it. Maybe like during Clone Conspiracy. So like a year and a half ago, maybe a little more than that at this point. Just wow. Wow. So anyways, that's my review. It was an interesting one. I haven't had a comic leave me this much at a loss of words or an explanation or understanding or insight into this thing, possibly ever. Part of it's because of the fact that there's literally 0% time between when I read this thing and when I did the review, so I haven't had time to fully brain meld it yet. And maybe I'll have some more insights into this thing going forward. That anyone would like this event that so far offers so little is baffling to me. Now, I agree with a lot of you that we should probably give it more of a chance than one issue, and hopefully it starts to show some more interesting colors, but right now it just feels like character death is supposed to somehow leave us surprised? Baffled? This is what I mean when I don't understand Tom King, and he writes like this a lot in the Batman series too, as if no human being has ever read a comic in the past. Nobody is familiar with comic book character death. Nobody is familiar with Batman acting like a grim butthole. It's profoundly ignorant, but doesn't match the man I know from Mr. Miracle and Vision. This is why I kind of want to talk to him about it, because I don't understand. Like, I get it when Bendis used to write a pretty lousy Marvel event, because you could see what he was going for, you can understand the challenge of these big crossover miniseries things, and it's easy to see what he was trying to do, and trying to go for, and where he kind of fell short. I can't begin to get into the insight of this. It's so weird. It feels like something that Bride Melter would trot out. And yeah, I know at the beginning of the review I didn't see the comparisons, but the more I talk about this and unpack it, I'm starting to see the comparisons. But it's not a good comparison. It's the worst aspects of it. The childish approach to politics, which is weird from a guy who used to work for the CIA. The weird attempt at being dark and edgy, but being completely atonal to the coloring of this comic book, which is beautiful but doesn't fit with the tone of the story. And the stupid, boring plot about a bunch of characters dying. I am baffled when I see Arsenal and Wally West dead in the first issue. Who buys that this is a real thing in any way the second they see this? Like, you gotta own up to yourself at this point, because unless you're brand new to comics, in which case I don't blame you, comic book writing 101, but in the worst way possible. The easiest, simplest mistake to do is just trot out a bunch of deaths and expect them to mean something to the readers who, by now, know so much better. It's old news, guys. You can't surprise us with death anymore. Not unless you either figure out a clever way to do it in a different way, actually stick to one of these things for once, which will never actually happen over a long period of time, or do something innovative and different. Well, then Scott Snyder's Dark Knight's Metal, which hardly featured any major character death as far as I can tell, is better because it presented its own stakes and it was interesting enough on its own without resorting to character death. You'd think DC or Tom King would have learned something about all of this by now. I really only save the big rants for something that truly blows my mind in the most negative way possible, but that's the nature of criticism. It's easy to dig into something that sucks. It's harder to just talk about something that I love. I love the artwork, and you can see how much time I spent on that in comparison to the script. But that's how it works. That's the life of a critic. That's part of the fun. Because like I said, part of the reason I wanted to get into this thing was just like, oh, this might be fun to just tear apart a new comic that, by all accounts, looked terrible, and by all accounts, is terrible. Again, please, let me know why or if you liked it. I need more information, guys. I'm asking because I need to know. What am I missing here? Certainly I'm missing something. It can't be this empty. God, I hope it's not this empty. Anyways, if you like Comic Island, you should check out our Patreon page in the video description below. And finally, don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep reading comics.